Hello people of Earth, it's Bright Garlic here, coming to you from the plains of central Victoria on a very warm 26th of February 2024. You'll have to forgive me this episode. I have a wasp above on the veranda to my left and a wasp under the floorboards immediately below my feet. Now, the wasps might flare up at either time. They seem to be having a battle of noise. I can't do much about it. I'm stuck in this room. You might also hear some budgies out there and baby magpies in the distance, but I'll try, if I can, to keep other noises to a minimum, but I can't control the birds, I'm afraid. So you'll just have to get used to it. So I'd like to dedicate today's episode to a young friend of mine, Marcus, from Sweden. Marcus and I were on a nearby mountain, Bora Bora, when Marcus came to Australia, and he took the time to come and visit me. And whilst you're on top of the mountain and watching the sunset, Marcus asked a very powerful question that I've been thinking about every day since. And when I say every day, maybe just a minute some days, maybe longer. It's not something I've been able to answer, but I thought it was such a profound and simple question. It's one worth exploring, and it relates very much to this particular episode. So Marcus asked me, what is connection? What is connection? And as a human being and a former therapist many years ago, I've had lots of opportunities to explore that question and to see other people grapple with that question. So today's episode's a little bit different. In mid-2015, I had an epiphany about ET contact that I probably should have had 5 years before, but I'm a bit slow. I've often said I'm like a man that jumps on a ball, tries to balance himself and keeps falling off and cracking his skull and gets back on again. I'm very slow to understand things and for things to sink in. So this epiphany came to me, and I wrote a blog post about it on my ET&I blog. So I'd like to read that blog post, and then I have a few notes, some additional thoughts about that epiphany that I've had since then. So the title of this blog post was An Epiphany About Contact. Hey friends, it's my wish that you are all well. A little while ago I had a very profound epiphany in which I came to see very clearly what many of the strands of my life are all about. I want to share it with you because it will help you understand what I'm all about, and I believe it will help you to understand what contact is really all about. But first, let me tell you about the kind of little boy I used to be. One of my earliest memories goes back to when I was just a babe in the crib, and my family lived in Penang in Malaysia. I remember watching the geckos climbing over the walls and coming up to me in the crib. I would try to speak to them and touch them. I have another memory from about age 5, standing next to a friend's above-ground pool and being mesmerized by the water boatmen that were swimming in the pool. In my mind, they were the most beautiful creatures I had ever seen. Later, as a 9, 10, and 11-year-old, I would take all kinds of crazy risks to catch lizards and snakes. I remember once I climbed over the sharp razor fence around an electrical substation to catch a bearded dragon. A little while later, I hid a venomous brown snake in my pocket so my father wouldn't find it. Then, about a year later, while living in Hong Kong, I pulled a spitting cobra out of some jungle creepers and threw it down near a friend and proceeded to play dodgems with it as it spat poison at me. Needless to say, my friend took off in a hurry, returning with his mum and their red 65 MGB trying to run over it. Back then, I craved contact with the natural world in all its forms. And to be honest, who I was as a 7-year-old is the same as who I am now. You know the old adage, give me a child until he is 7 and I will give you the man. In my case, it is categorically true. Today it is my love of the natural world and my connection with it that sustains me. I cannot go a day without being connected to the natural world in some small way. And I believe that all the things that I have done with my life reflect the same need for connection. I have spent the last 28 years of my life trying to write, and I think that my life as a writer has been in some way an effort on my part to connect with my fellow human beings. My life as a therapist has also been an effort on my part to connect with my fellow human beings. And all of the fringe activities that I have brought into my life have been in a similar way an effort to connect with something else, to have communion with the other, and to feel bound together in some small way. I have been thinking, feeling, and doing all of these activities now for a very long time as like discrete little projects, little parcels that were separate from one another. And the epiphany that came to me was that they are all the same thing, an effort to connect and to feel connected. After my being taken to merge with the light in 2011, I began to feel very different about my life and my place with Earth. I began to see how all division is but an illusion, and how all division is just a perception of division from the whole. I had experienced the whole, and I think as a result I have been trying to understand and to experience more of the whole again, which I suppose is something that I have been doing for my entire life. A couple of years ago, I was reminded how I had had other experiences with the light, one at the beginning of my existence and others at various intervals. And so my experience in 2011 was a kind of reminder, a reminder that has ignited a real desire to awaken to the entirety of my being. I suppose in some way, all of these fringe experiences are an expression of that. It's something that I have always done, but it's been pushed in a particular direction. I think it will make more sense then when I tell you that the following list contains a series of activities that represent my urge to remember the light and awaken to the entirety of my being. Connect with people from all walks of life. Help to heal people. Connect with ETs both physically and internally. Connect with animals, particularly birds, ants, whales, and reptiles. Plant thousands of trees to help heal Earth. Connect with trees. See my previous TSM on that subject. Connect with the spirits of the earth, consciousness of plants, rocks, soil, sand, mountains, water, air, wind, and earth. Connect with beings of light, balls of light. Visit individuals in the past and future. Connect with those who have passed beyond physical life. Connect with the myriad aspects of the self. connect with God. Connect with the hairy folk, Yowies. Connect with the beings that may be the so-called batscotch. Connect with the beings I call pig squealing, who I think are ETs, but I'm not absolutely sure. Connect with events, people and places through internal and external symbols, inner and outer are one. Connect with beings that identify themselves as angels of light. See my previous post on this. They were not actually angels. Connect with other entities, both with form and formless. I suppose another aspect of my epiphany has been that having life-threatening, life-affirming tumours has taken me spiritually to a point where I see that life is truly only a dream, but a dream that we share with an infinite number of life forms, that together are all expressions of the light. That is the web that binds us. It is only through illness and confronting death that I have seen clearly and experienced the fullness of life and understood experientially the Buddha's first two noble truths. Life is dukkha, suffering, and that suffering is caused by attachment and aversion. So when I connect with other beings, I understand this from a different perspective, and that deepens my love of existence and of God and my appreciation for all our suffering and all our struggle. I don't know if what I am trying to tell you makes any sense at all. It's almost too hard to express. But this epiphany hasn't just happened in one go. It continues to unfold sporadically, and through its revelation I am beginning to see value in everything, both good and bad. So it's with that understanding that I can continue to connect with anything, no matter how frightening. Because every relationship, every creature, every being, every insight, every exchange between us has value and purpose. If one person can ignite a torch and be a torch-bearer, others can see and others can follow. I'm not saying I am the first person to be like this, but I am me. And if by being a torchbearer I can illuminate the way, then I think that is a good thing. But all torchbearers must ultimately pass on the torch. So perhaps my sharing is a way of passing on the torch and saying to you, have courage, enter the window of your fear and see what you find on the other side. For what you find might just set fire to your life and remind you of what you truly are. For you are the light, remembering its way back home. So since posting that blog post in 2015, a lot has happened in my life. I guess you'd say I've expanded my experiments, my contacts, and my relationships to include more ETs. And of course that wasn't all my doing, that had a lot to do with the ETs. And also to include deceased ETs and deceased hominids who identify themselves as what we call Denisovans. I've also branched out, I guess, in terms of trying to perceive memories and picking up on the memories or the history of natural objects. Things like bones and sand, soil, rocks, feathers, and also man-made objects like jewelry and coins, books, photos, ancient and modern artifacts like stone tools. On top of that, I developed my aspects of self psychological model and continued to develop ways of connecting with other aspects, both in the present, in the perceived past and future, and even some in conjoined space. And I know I haven't mentioned conjoined space, only in passing. I will come to that in the future. More recently, I began tracking animals and trying to connect with them. Not so much, I've always been able to discern tracks, at least the animals here. So I haven't been doing it that way. I've been trying to connect through my mind's eye by touching the print and seeing what comes into my mind's eye and then looking at the landscape. And perhaps I can talk about that in greater detail another time. So some of this work has been done, I guess, via conversations, telepathy, and also through symbolic connections. And people that follow my blog will have heard me talk about that before. Some also through direct visual and visceral connection. And I often sought proof of what I was doing. I just didn't want to do things and to believe it without finding some evidence that it was true. Now, it hasn't always been possible to find evidence, but where I could set up an experiment and find evidence, I would do that. And I guess occasionally evidence came about through some kind of synchronous link, something that happened that I couldn't account for suddenly happening in my life. So I guess at this point, you're probably wondering, well, why have I told you all of this? What's it all about? What is any of this epiphany about? I've talked about this so as to make the point that there is no separation between anything in space or what we think of as time, which is really just space. There is, from the point of view of ultimate reality, only one. And since my experiences of merging with the light, I felt a strong desire to reconnect my conscious awareness with as many aspects of the one as possible, whether it's in perceived others or within myself. I've discovered that there are no limits to what you can connect to and probably how you can connect. The only limits are pragmatic limits. How much can you give of yourself before you are worn out mentally or emotionally or physically or all three? My original epiphany was that all is one, and I've been trying to awaken my ongoing sense of contact to being part of the one and being the one itself. I've said many times before that so-called paranormal abilities are unimportant. They're a distraction in our development. And I don't think of these things that I've described in my blog post and some of them that I've described now, I don't think of these as paranormal abilities, supernatural abilities, whatever you want to call them, metanormal, whatever. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I think of them as paying attention to your mind and your body. And as I've said before, what matters most is that we ground ourselves in the here and the now, and in an awareness of mind and body. The things that I've been doing now for a very long time and always adding something new to it, they're not difficult to do, but they take a dedication and a genuine effort. It takes time to cultivate presence and to be aware of your mind and body. And that's the real investment that I've made. All the rest of it came on top of doing that. And only then, when you've done that, when you've paid attention to your mind and your body, when you have mastered that, then you can pay attention to other things and understand the full potential of the human mind. So the journey I've been on began with a great love of the natural world. And it's that love that keeps me going in my explorations. My ET friend dude has a habit of plonking himself down in the sand or in the dirt, wherever he is outdoors, and filling his hands with that sand or dirt and letting it run through his fingers. And what he does is he then perceives the deep history of that place. And you might say he develops a set of anchors in time, and he can then use those anchors to visit specific events. Not only that, he can perceive by breathing the air and doing the same thing, but he likes to get his hands into that tactile experience. So I will never have that ability that he has. Certainly not at that level, but what I would like to have is a feeling that I'm connected to a living web of energy in which it's possible to perceive the past, present and future, whichever I wish to perceive. I have no doubt that one day many people will come to understand the same sort of things I'm talking about. More people will have these abilities, and there will be projects not unlike C5 projects that exist, or the Skull Project, or other projects like the Skull Project that attempt to connect with the human afterlife. All of these projects are projects in which people are actively trying to connect with other life forms on Earth or in the afterlife. But I've no doubt there will be projects where there are people actively connecting with other life forms on Earth, and things like deceased ancient hominids, and hominids that are currently alive, be they the hairy folk or apes, chimps, and so on. But also projects where people attempt to connect with inanimate objects and their histories. So what I'm doing is building a kind of living palimpsest that informs my sense of connection to and being the one. And that is the potential for anyone who wishes to go down a similar path. You too can build a living, temporal, spatial palimpsest within yourself in which you come to know the greater self. The experiences I've been having are more than just interspecies communication. They are a means of knowing the other from the inside, and by knowing the other, we come to know a little more of the greater self, which is everything. I've developed my own methods for doing this work, but there is the opportunity for humanity to develop countless methods to connect with the greater self. And of course, there are countless beings to connect with. So that's, I guess, how things have changed a little bit since I first wrote that post. I will just add one small thing. Since that post was written, I developed this wonderful relationship with a particular wallaby and a particular kangaroo. Now, the kangaroo only lived 4 months. The wallaby lived 2 years before she was hit by a car. But out of those relationships with Loki and Gandalf, that's not Loki the god, that's Loki from Bullock, Lokey. I was then able to build a relationship with all the wallabies who live here. And at one point there was maybe close to 30 wallabies here. For some reason they've all disappeared now. I don't know what's happened. We've had disaster after disaster, flood after flood, and fire risk and the like, heat. They've disappeared, and I've heard it said before that sometimes wallabies can go away for long periods of time and then reappear. So I've been quite concerned about them, and I haven't seen them. But before then, I developed this wonderful relationship with the wallabies and put extra food down when things were hard, and I would go and spend time among them. And they would get very close to me and became very trusting. And prior to Loki, I had a different relationship with the wallabies. I would see them and they would scoot off really quickly. So her mother having this accident and us having to care for this little wallaby and raise this wallaby put me in touch with a greater world that was living here that I didn't have enough of appreciation for. And the same thing happened with Gandalf when his mother was run over down the road and made a complete mess, raising this tiny little thing, and unfortunately picked up some infection and died. But in addition to the wonderful relationship I had with him, I since started to develop a relationship with the remainder of his family who were left behind, the two siblings that were left behind, one of whom's gone on to have its own babies. And I had been cultivating this relationship with the kangaroos whilst I was cultivating it with the wallabies. And so every night I will go out and I have a circle I've made, an astro-archaeological calendar, and I've mowed the grass down there, and I've made it accessible for the kangaroos to come and eat fresh grass. So I go out there every night and I do the old Wallaby Trail walk. And so I now have this wonderful trusting relationship with the kangaroos, and the kangaroos are shot by all of the farmers around here. Nearly every night, every couple of nights I will hear shooting, and you know somebody's been killed and shot. So I've been able to have this wonderful heartwarming relationship with wallabies and kangaroos that has really put me in touch with the life that is here. So that's one of the big changes. And so what I've discovered is that when you're open in your heart and you have an open mind to these things, you can develop different relationships with different life forms. They don't have to be ETs. And there is a sacredness to the natural world that reveals itself to you slowly. This has happened over decades for me. Slowly nature reveals more and more and more. And it's a kind of holiness, this sacredness, this sacred bond that you have. And you don't get it by just saying, I'm going to nature and nature's going to show me everything. Or I'm going to see what's there. Or I'm going to catalogue it all. Or I'm going to name it all. It doesn't happen that way. It happens by going to lots of different places and spending time there and slowly letting the learning come, slowly developing knowledge of the relationships that exist in that place and cultivating relationships with the things that are there. For me, on a daily basis, it's the birds and the plants here, and at the moment, the kangaroos. At other times, it will be other things. So what I would say to you in terms of this epiphany I've talked about is, if you want to know life and if you want to build a bridge with ETs, build a bridge with the life that is closest to you. It might just be your pet, your cat, your dog, your bird, your fish, whatever. We'll build that connection first. Cultivate goodness and kindness, love, compassion towards that creature. Maybe it's a special tree. Could be anything. Work with what's in your environment. And if you can open yourself up to the sacredness of nature, do that. And when you do that, you create a beacon within yourself. Your being acts like a beacon, and the ETs will see that and know that and respond to that, and you will be ready for contact. The last thing they want is somebody who's hostile and willing and ready to hurt anything and everything. Beings like that don't get to meet ETs unless the ETs find some reason to get some good out of you, to create some lasting good. So work on what is in your immediate environment, and you will get to connect with those things and build loving relationships. Then you will be able to build relationships with the ETs. And there's no order in how to do this. Start with what's in your immediate environment, then the ETs. But you could have also, before the ETs, tried to connect with something else like the hairy folk, Yowies, Bigfoot, or deceased people. We're not dead, more alive than us. Just their bodies are dead. Or you could try and connect with the ETs and then try this other stuff afterwards. There's no right order. What I would suggest, though, is start with your immediate environment. That's the only part of it I would say you start with, because that will teach you how to be a good person, how to be a kind person, how to cultivate the right feelings for building other relationships. So in a sense, my epiphany is something that has helped me to understand what I'm doing, but I would also like to be able to use it to help other people to understand what is possible. So if you found what I spoke about this episode interesting or useful, stay tuned to my blog, ET and I, where I'll talk more about this issue, and eventually I'll release a series of books about how to develop human potential. So thank you for listening. Happy trails, people of Earth. I'm Bray Garlic. Arrivederci.